The diner was bright and warm, sunlight streaming through the large windows. The smell of coffee and fried food filled the air as customers chatted over their meals. At one of the tables near the window, an old black woman sat quietly. She wore a simple pink shirt and black trousers, her hands resting on the table. In one hand, she held a thick stack of cash, casually flipping through it as she waited for her food. A young white waitress walked by, her eyes flickering toward the money. She wore a crisp white button-up shirt and a black skirt that stopped just above her knees. Her dark hair was tied back in a neat ponytail. She paused near the old woman's table, looking her up and down with a slight frown. "You know," she said, her voice dripping with fake politeness, "we usually get a different kind of customer here." The old woman didn't look up. She simply kept counting the cash, her fingers moving slowly over each bill. The waitress shifted on her feet, annoyed at being ignored. "I mean, not to be rude, but maybe this isn't the right place for you," she added, crossing her arms. A few people at nearby tables glanced over, their conversations pausing. The tension was thick. The old woman finally lifted her head, her dark eyes calm but steady. "Honey," she said, her voice smooth and unbothered, "I've been coming to places like this longer than you've been alive." The waitress opened her mouth to say something else, but just then, the diner's manager, a tall man with a tired but kind face, walked over. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, looking between them. The old woman smiled. "Oh, just fine," she said, then turned to the waitress. "But I think your girl here might need a lesson in manners." The waitress's face turned red. "I was just making sure I knew my place." The old woman finished for her. She chuckled softly, then slid the stack of cash across the table toward the manager. "Here, this should cover my meal. And everyone else is in here today." The manager's eyes widened. The waitress froze, her mouth hanging open. The whole diner went quiet, all eyes now on the old woman. She stood up, smoothing out her trousers. "Sometimes," she said, looking directly at the waitress, "the people you look down on are the ones who could change your whole day." With that, she walked out, leaving behind a stunned silence and a room full of free meals. The diner stayed silent for a long moment after the old woman left. The waitress, Jenna, stood frozen, her face burning with shame. The manager, Carl, stared at the stack of cash on the table, then slowly picked it up. He counted it quickly, enough to cover every meal in the diner, plus a generous tip. "You hear that, folks?" Carl announced, turning to the customers. "Your meals are on the house today, thanks to that kind lady." A murmur of surprise and gratitude spread through the room. People smiled, shaking their heads in disbelief. Some even clapped. But all Jenna could do was stand there, her stomach twisting. She had been rude for no reason, and now the woman she had insulted had just paid for everyone's food. At the counter, an older man in a trucker hat turned to his friend. "See, that's class right there. You don't judge a book by its cover." His friend nodded, shooting Jenna a disapproving look. Jenna's hands trembled as she grabbed a coffee pot, trying to busy herself. But everywhere she turned, she felt eyes on her. Whispers followed her as she refilled cups. "Can you believe that, waitress? What kind of person talks to an elder like that?" The words stung, but she knew they were right. Carl pulled her aside near the kitchen. His voice was low but firm. "Jenna, what was that about?" She swallowed hard, unable to meet his eyes. "I don't know. I just thought." "You thought what?" "That she didn't belong here." Carl shook his head. "That woman's been coming to this diner since before I started working here. She tips well, minds her business, and today, she just paid for 30 people's lunches because you decided to act foolish." Jenna's throat tightened. "I didn't mean." "It doesn't matter what you meant. It's what you did." Carl sighed. "Take the rest of the day off. Think about how you treat people." Jenna nodded, fighting back tears. She untied her apron and grabbed her bag, avoiding the stares as she hurried out the door. The sunlight outside felt too bright, too harsh. She sat on the curb, head in her hands, replaying the moment in her mind. Why had she said those things? The woman hadn't done anything wrong. Inside the diner, the mood lifted as people enjoyed their free meals. Laughter returned, but the story of the old woman's kindness spread quickly. At one table, a group of college students debated leaving extra tips for the staff to make up for Jenna's mistake. Meanwhile, Jenna pulled out her phone, hesitating before typing a text to Carl. "I'm really sorry. I'll do better." She didn't know if the old woman would ever come back, but if she did, Jenna promised herself one thing: she'd make it right. The next morning, the diner was unusually busy. Word had spread about what happened, and people came not just for the food, but to see if the old woman would return. Jenna had barely slept, her mind racing with guilt. She tied her apron extra tight, took a deep breath, and walked onto the floor, determined to prove she could change. The bell above the door jingled, and Jenna's head snapped up. But it was just a family with 2 kids. She forced the smile and got back to work, refilling coffees and taking orders with careful politeness. Every time the door opened, her stomach flipped. What would she even say if the woman came back? Halfway through the breakfast rush, the door swung open again. This time, it was her. The old woman stepped inside, dressed in a soft yellow blouse and the same black trousers. She moved slowly but with purpose, her sharp eyes scanning the room. The hush fell over the diner as people recognized her. Jenna froze, her hands clutching her order pad. Carl, wiping down the counter, gave her a firm nod. This was her chance. Swallowing hard, Jenna walked over. Her voice came out shaky. "Good morning, ma'am. I'd like to apologize for yesterday." The old woman studied her for a long moment before sitting down. "Apologies are easy," she said. "Changing ain't." "I know," Jenna said quickly. "And I want to do better. Can I get you something? On the house." A small smile tugged at the woman's lips. "Coffee, black, and some scrambled eggs." Jenna nodded eagerly and rushed to put in the order. The diners nearby exchanged glances, some skeptical, some hopeful. When the food was ready, Jenna carried it over carefully, like it was the most important meal she'd ever served. "Here you go, Mrs." Jenna hesitated, realizing she didn't even know the woman's name. "Williams," the woman said, "but you can call me Ms. Elaine." "Ms. Elaine," Jenna repeated. She hesitated, then blurted out, "Why you pay for everyone after how I acted?" Ms. Elaine stirred her coffee slowly. "Because kindness ain't about who deserves it," she said. "It's about who you are." She took a sip, then added, "And everybody deserves a chance to do better." Jenna blinked back unexpected tears. Before she could respond, a little girl from the nearby family table approached, holding out a crayon drawing. "This is for you," the girl said shyly to Ms. Elaine. "Mommy said you're the nice lady who bought everybody food." Ms. Elaine's face softened as she took the drawing. "Well, ain't this sweet?" She patted the girl's hand, then looked up at Jenna. "See, this right here, this is what matters." Jenna watched as the diner buzzed back to life around them, the weight on her chest feeling a little lighter. Maybe second chances were real after all. The days that followed changed the diner in small but noticeable ways. Jenna became more careful with her words, catching herself whenever she started to judge someone by their appearance. Ms. Elaine started coming in every Tuesday and Thursday like clockwork, always sitting at the same booth by the window. One rainy afternoon, the diner was nearly empty when Ms. Elaine walked in shaking water off her umbrella. Jenna hurried over with a towel. "Let me get that for you," she offered. Ms. Elaine handed it over with a grateful nod. "You're learning," Ms. Elaine remarked as she settled into her usual seat. Jenna poured her coffee without being asked. "I'm trying. It's just hard to unlearn stuff, you know." Ms. Elaine stirred sugar into her cup. "Child, we all carry things we shouldn't. The trick is knowing when to put them down." The bell over the door chimed as a young couple entered, their clothes wrinkled and damp from the rain. The man's hands shook slightly as he looked at the menu prices. Jenna watched them for a moment, remembering Ms. Elaine's words. "I'll be right back," she told Ms. Elaine. When she reached the couple's table, she smiled. "Our soup of the day comes with free bread if you're interested. It's real good on cold days like this." The couple exchanged relieved glances. "Just one bowl to share, please," the woman said quietly. Jenna nodded, coming right up. As she walked past Ms. Elaine's table, the older woman gave her an approving look that made Jenna stand a little taller. When the check came, the young man paled slightly at the total, $6.50. He reached into his pocket and carefully counted out change. Jenna glanced at Ms. Elaine, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. "Actually," Jenna said, "there's a special today. First-time customers get 50% off." She quickly adjusted the total before they could see the original amount. The couple's faces lit up. "Really? That's so kind of you," the woman said. They left a $1 tip, all they could spare, but to Jenna, it felt more valuable than a 20. Ms. Elaine was waiting by the register when Jenna returned. "You did good," she said simply, placing exact change for her meal on the counter. "I had a good teacher," Jenna replied. Ms. Elaine chuckled as she buttoned her coat. "No, child. That kindness was always in you. You just needed to let it out." She patted Jenna's hand before walking out into the rain. Leaving behind more than just a tip, she left a lesson Jenna would never forget. The diner felt warmer after that, even as the storm raged outside. And for the first time in a long while, Jenna felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. The summer heat settled over the town, turning the diner into a welcome escape with its humming air conditioners and frosty milkshakes. Jenna had started keeping a small notebook in her apron pocket, jotting down regulars' favorite orders, something Ms. Elaine had suggested. One sweltering afternoon, Ms. Elaine arrived wearing a wide-brimmed hat and carrying a paper bag. She waved Jenna over as soon as she sat down. "Got something for you," she said, pushing the bag across the table. Inside were 3 worn paperback books. "These helped me when I was about your age," Ms. Elaine said as Jenna flipped through them. The spines were cracked from use, the margins filled with neat pencil notes. Jenna ran her fingers over the handwritten notes. "You want me to borrow these? Keep 'em," Ms. Elaine said. "Words got power, child. These ones taught me how to use mine." As Jenna tucked the books carefully under the counter, the door burst open. A group of loud teenagers piled in, their laughter filling the space. At the back of the group, a shy girl hung back, her eyes darting nervously around the room. Jenna watched as the girl's friends grabbed a large booth, not saving her a seat. Without thinking, Jenna grabbed an extra chair and carried it over. "Here," she said to the girl. "Wouldn't want anyone left out." The girl's surprised smile reminded Jenna of herself at that age, always trying to fit in. She took their orders with extra patience, even when one boy snapped his fingers at her. Ms. Elaine watched from her booth, sipping iced tea through a straw. When the group left, Jenna found a napkin tucked under the shy girl's plate. "Thanks for the chair, Emily," was scribbled in messy handwriting. Jenna pinned it to the staff bulletin board, right next to her schedule. Ms. Elaine stayed later than usual that day. As the dinner crowd thinned out, she motioned Jenna over. "You're growing into yourself," she observed, like a tree finally finding its shape. Jenna wiped her hands on her apron. "Still got a long way to go." "Everybody does," Ms. Elaine said, standing up slowly. She left 2 bills on the table, one for the check, one folded neatly beneath the salt shaker where Jenna would find it later. When Jenna unfolded it, she found not just a generous tip, but a handwritten note. "Keep watering that good heart of yours. It's starting to bloom." The words stayed with Jenna long after her shift ended, through the walk home under the starry sky, all the way to her small apartment where the gifted books waited on her nightstand. That night, for the first time in years, She fell asleep feeling like she was becoming someone she could be proud of. The autumn leaves had started turning when Jenna noticed Miss Elaine's hands shaking more than usual. The older woman tried to hide it, gripping her coffee cup with both hands, but Jenna saw. She didn't mention it, just made sure to place the cup carefully in front of her each morning. One chilly Tuesday, Miss Elaine didn't show up for her usual breakfast. Jenna kept glancing at the door, rearranging the sugar packets for the 10th time. By noon, she couldn't ignore the knot in her stomach. "Carl," she asked during a lull, "you think I could take my break early?" Carl raised an eyebrow, but nodded. "Everything all right?" "Just need to check on someone," Jenna said, already untying her apron. She walked the 6 blocks to Maple Street, where Miss Elaine lived in a small blue house with white shutters. The front garden was neatly kept, chrysanthemums blooming in orderly rows. Jenna hesitated at the gate, suddenly unsure. What if Miss Elaine thought she was being nosy? Before she could decide, the front door creaked open. Miss Elaine stood in the doorway, wrapped in a thick cardigan. "Well," she called out, "you gonna stand there all day or come inside?" The house smelled like cinnamon and old books. Photos covered the walls. A younger Miss Elaine in a nurse's uniform, graduation pictures of kids who must be her grandchildren. Jenna's fingers brushed a frame showing Miss Elaine standing with a tall man in military dress. "My husband," Miss Elaine said from the kitchen. "Gone 32 years now." She carried a tray with 2 steaming mugs. "Figured you'd want some hot chocolate since you walked all this way." Jenna took the mug carefully. You weren't at the diner." I got worried. Miss Elaine settled into her armchair with a sigh. "Just a touch of arthritis acting up. Nothing this old body can't handle." She studied Jenna over her mug. "You got a good heart, coming to check like this." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Outside, leaves drifted past the window. Jenna noticed the stack of library books on the side table, the crossword puzzle half finished on the coffee table. This was a home lived in, loved in. "You ever think about nursing?" Miss Elaine asked suddenly. Jenna nearly choked on her drink. "Me, I barely passed biology." "Didn't ask about your grades," Miss Elaine said. "Asked if you ever thought about helping people for a living." Jenna looked down at her hands. The same hands that had carried extra chairs, adjusted bills, learned how to make coffee just right. Maybe they could do more. When she left an hour later, Miss Elaine pressed a slip of paper into her hand. "Community College Information Night," it read, with a date circled in red. Jenna walked back to the diner slowly, the paper warm in her pocket. The autumn air smelled like change, like possibilities. For the first time, she wondered what else she might be good at besides waiting tables. That night, she tucked the community college flyer next to Miss Elaine's note about her blooming heart. Both felt equally precious. Winter arrived with a dusting of snow that melted by noon, leaving the sidewalks slick and shiny. Jenna stood outside the community college auditorium, shifting from foot to foot. The information night had started 10 minutes ago, but she couldn't make herself go in. A familiar voice came from behind her. "You planning to admire that brick wall all night, or you gonna learn something?" Jenna spun around. Miss Elaine stood there bundled in a thick coat, her breath making little clouds in the cold air. "What are you doing here?" Jenna asked. "Same as you," Miss Elaine said, taking her arm. "Seeing what opportunities look like." Inside, the warmth hit them like a blanket. Tables lined the room with signs for different programs: business, technology, healthcare. Miss Elaine steered them toward the nursing booth without hesitation. A woman with kind eyes and a stethoscope around her neck smiled at them. "Interested in nursing?" Jenna opened her mouth to say she was just looking, but Miss Elaine spoke first. "This young lady's got the makings of a fine nurse. What does she need to get started?" For the next hour, Jenna listened as the woman explained prerequisites and financial aid. The more she heard, the less impossible it seemed. Miss Elaine asked sharp questions about class schedules that would work with Jenna's diner shifts. On the way out, Jenna's head swam with information. I don't know if I can do this, she admitted as they walked through the parking lot. Measy Lane stopped under a streetlight. Course you can. Might take some time, might be hard, but you can. She pulled a folded paper from her purse. Filled this out for you. Scholarship application for non-traditional students. Jenna's eyes stung. Why are you doing all this for me? Measy Lane buttoned her coat against the wind. When my husband came back from the war, it was a nurse who helped him walk again. Changed our whole lives. She patted Jenna's cheek. Now it's your turn to change somebody's life. They walked in silence to the bus stop. Snowflakes began drifting down again, catching in Measy Lane's hair like tiny stars. Jenna thought about bandages and blood pressure cuffs, about holding someone's hand when they were scared. Maybe this was who she was meant to become. The bus arrived with a squeak of brakes. As Measy Lane stepped on, she turned back. Oh, I almost forgot. She handed Jenna a small box. Inside was a stethoscope pin, the kind nurses wore on their lapels. For luck, Measy Lane said. Jenna pinned it to her coat right then, the metal cool against her fingers. As the bus pulled away, she touched it again, already imagining the day she'd earn a real one. The snow fell harder now, but she barely felt the cold. Spring came early that year, bringing cherry blossoms that scattered like pink snow across the sidewalks. Jenna stood in front of the diner's big window, adjusting her new blue scrubs, her last shift before starting clinical rotations. The stethoscope around her neck still felt strange and wonderful. Carl came out from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. Look at you, he said, shaking his head. All official now. Jenna smoothed the fabric of her scrubs. Still can't quite believe it. The bell over the door jingled. Measy Lane walked in slowly, using a cane now, but still holding herself tall. Her eyes lit up when she saw Jenna. Well now, she said. That's a sight to warm an old woman's heart. Jenna rushed to pull out her usual booth. I was hoping you'd come today. She poured Measy Lane's coffee without asking. Still black, still in the same chipped mug they always gave her. Measy Lane reached into her bag and pulled out a small package wrapped in newspaper. For your first day tomorrow. Inside was a brand new penlight, the kind nurses used to check patients' eyes. Jenna's throat tightened. You shouldn't have. Hush, Measy Lane said. Every good nurse needs proper tools. She took a slow sip of coffee. You nervous? Jenna twirled the penlight in her fingers, terrified. What if I mess up? What if you save someone? Measy Lane interrupted. What if you're exactly where you're meant to be? She reached across the table and squeezed Jenna's hand. You got this, child. The morning rush came then, and Jenna found herself moving between tables automatically, her body remembering routines her mind had already moved past. Regular customers congratulated her, some slipping extra tips into her pocket. At the end of her shift, Jenna untied her apron for the last time. It felt lighter than she remembered. Carl handed her a to-go box. Made your favorite, he said, for old time's sake. Measy Lane waited outside on the bench, soaking up the spring sunshine. Jenna sat beside her, the two of them watching people come and go from the diner. You'll come visit, right? Jenna asked. Tell me if the new girl makes your coffee wrong. Measy Lane chuckled. Course I will. But you? She pointed to the hospital visible down the street. You got bigger things to do now. Jenna looked at the building where she'd start her new life tomorrow. Then she looked at the woman who'd helped her find it. No words felt big enough, so she simply linked her arm through Measy Lane's and sat there quietly as the world moved around them. The cherry blossoms kept falling, covering the sidewalk in pink. Somewhere inside the diner, the new waitress laughed at something a customer said. Life went on, but differently now. Better.